Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Good afternoon. It's the 7th of February, 2021. And what's new? Polar vortex is back, and it's pretty cold. I think it's like 10 degrees outside, which I like. 15 degrees outside. It's still nice and cold, like brutally cold. And let's see what else is new. We've had a really, I feel like it's been pretty calm all week, other than, the same level of animosity on the internet about politics. I think I read about some county that had a COVID vaccine distribution facility. Their supply of vaccines were confiscated because they started distributing vaccines to other members of the community because they misinterpreted the orders from the government. Elon Musk managed to pump the price of Dogecoin 35%.
Well, it's not even just him. There's a commercial happening during the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah,
for Dogecoin. Yeah, so there's like, Elon pumped it, but there's like an actual massive pump happening around the Super Bowl, which happens ever so often. Like, they did the Rose Bowl. What was it, 2016 or something like that, with Bitcoin. Yeah, Bitcoin sponsored, or not Bitcoin. Somebody sponsored the Rose Bowl on behalf of the Bitcoin community because there is no like CEO or some shit like that.
Well,
or Bitcoin. Well, there's like,
I mean, if all the Chinese
developers,
if all the Chinese consortiums banded together, they've got 51% stake.
Right, but that's like quorum, which is not the same as like having an actual executive board.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's kind of where, again, like, this is a good discussion, like segue into discussion, because like I think a lot of people don't understand how blockchains work. So the simplest way to explain it is that a blockchain is a gigantic safe. And if people understand how safes work, when you transfer money in your bank account to another person, they don't actually go in the safe and just like move money from your lockbox to that person's lockbox. That's not how shit works. That's not how Bitcoin works either. But people like to use this analogy in that, what if the blockchain is a safe, then there's always a camera on it to know who's going in and who's coming out to mess around with the currency. The issue is, because it's pseudonymous, it's like the person going in is wearing a ski mask. You know kind of what they look like, but everybody who goes into that vault is wearing a ski mask. So when you go in, you're basically moving the representation of, you have to have a key to get into that vault, which is basically your private key. There's a public key, which then is representing who you are, and everybody can see that, but you have to use your private key to actually get into the vault and adjust the, you can only adjust what you can control, and in that case, you're probably sending it to someone for some reason.
I was always interested in the marketing behind the hardware wallet, because I always thought to myself, like, this is a digital currency. It's not supposed to. There isn't supposed to be some object that's actually valuable. I mean, I understand that there's some hard drives out there that have been lost, and they were holding data that was worth tens of millions of dollars. But the idea of a physical coin that you could possess that contained some store of value was always kind of amusing to me. It's like there aren't actually coins.
Right.
The,
People
the,
are carrying
the
keys.
Bitcoin that you have right now isn't the Bitcoin that you'll have tomorrow.
It's not, but you're not carrying Bitcoin, you're carrying keys.
Yeah, I know.
And those keys are connected to an account that represents what it's like an integer. So you're basically carrying keys to an integer, and you can modify that integer with those keys. And that's what the hardware wallet is meant to be. But people are so wrapped around this notion of a hard currency that even when somebody's using their debit card, they're in their subconscious thinking like, oh, money's going out of my account and like going into that person's account. And that's just not how that shit works anymore. It's just integer representation movement.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is, okay, let's back this up one level. The notion of currency is something that emerged in society to get a common representation for value. And the reason this had to occur is that when you barter and trade for things, there's going to come a point where it's going to be impossible to figure out how many apples it costs for you to pay for a month's worth of internet. Like, or how many chickens is it going to cost for me to acquire a t-shirt? And these types of exchanges are facilitated through currency as a medium, because then if I can say, oh, this t-shirt's worth $20, these chickens are worth $30, then you actually realize it's like a portion of a chicken, which is not like, you can't trade a portion of a live chicken for a t-shirt, and thus that trade becomes impossible. And this is kind of where there are barriers to commerce that emerge from not being able to partition the items being bartered in the way that they actually need to be to get something. Like, you couldn't barter if you have let's say an ounce of gold and you're trying to get a fucking bagel. You're going to the bagel shop and they're supposed to have a gold scale there? No, of course not. That's fucking stupid. So that person who has the gold sells a portion of their gold and then use that money to go acquire the fucking bagel. That said, when we get to a point where we don't need an intermediary to create the currency, in that traditionally it was going to be a village, city, and more likely a nation or empire that is creating a currency to then put the face of the ruler on it, to then remind people who is the ruler, but also in facilitating facilitating commerce, they are reminding the people that they are doing them a favor by making commerce easier. So there's this element of centralized currency was useful when it was not possible to create decentralized currency, but now that it's possible to create decentralized currency, the centralized currency is less useful and in many ways more oppressive. So this is kind of where people don't understand why currencies exist, let alone the difference between a centralized and a decentralized, to understand what's happening with things like Dogecoin or Bitcoin. Because then, as you pointed out, Bitcoin is a lot more centralized in that there are like three, at any given point, there's like 2 or 3 big mining pools. I think maybe 4 now. If they put their powers together, they would have enough hash power to modify the Bitcoin blockchain as they see fit. This has happened before. G hash hit 51% and decided not to fork the blockchain. So it was a voluntary decision, not that it was impossible. So there's all these notions of like, oh, Bitcoin is immutable. No, it's not. Nothing is immutable, especially when it comes to distributed computing. It's only as immutable as the consensus of the controllers of the nodes establish quorum. And this gets to the point where if there was a point where the Bitcoin blockchain there was a contention between the community as to how they wanted to fork it, and it was like user activated soft fork versus some sort, I forget the name of the hard fork, whatever it was. The communities decided there was two different ways to approach it. And what happened at that point, Bitcoin Cash emerged because one part of the community wanted to go a completely different route. And then there was like later Bitcoin Satoshi's vision. There's all these things that emerged because the community could not decide, like Bitcoin Diamond. There's a bunch of bullshit. But effectively, what was ultimately realized is that the only thing that's really the common point of the Bitcoin community, if people are honest, is the desire to make money. There's not actually a ubiquitous desire to decentralize anything, not a desire to overturn financial systems. A lot of people are just in Bitcoin to make money, if not all of the people in Bitcoin specifically. So this is kind of where you get these narratives emerging that then, oh, this is for the people, this is for the community, this is for making people, this is be the biggest wealth transfer in the history of man. Motherfucker, the Winklevoss twins got so much goddamn Bitcoin. This ain't about to transfer the power to the people. Yeah, a few poor people will get rich. Yeah, of course, that shit always happens. But ultimately, with what we're seeing right now, people are too slow to the information forefront is what happens. And ultimately, it doesn't matter if it's Dogecoin, it don't matter if it's GameStop, it don't matter if it's AMC. The average person is too fucking self-absorbed, too wrapped up in some bullshit as goddamn daily nonsense that they think they are too fucking important to go learn about this shit. And every goddamn time rich people fucking take their positions and then feed these narratives to poor people as if, oh, this is your fucking lottery out of poverty. This is the one, you fucking person that's 10 years late to Dogecoin. You fucking asshole that's 10 years late to Bitcoin. That's how they see these people, because then when it's like, oh, who the fuck do you think can afford a goddamn Super Bowl commercial? A poor person? No. This shit is like at least $1 million fucking a minute. At least, if not $1 million per 30 seconds. It's like, it may be more than that at this point because of fucking inflation on the goddamn bitch ass US dollar.
A 30-second commercial is $5.6 million.
Sounds like the long con.
Oh, 100%. And it's the longest con because they keep doing this shit every fucking time. Every goddamn year is something new that people think that they're going to hop in on and beat the rich people. They're going to beat the house this time. They're going to beat the networks. They're going to beat the people who are coordinating the fucking Dogecoin commercials. They're going to beat them. Somehow, I know better than the people who are putting the fucking commercial on TV. I know when the time is, and I know the top of the market. And it's like over and over and over. Last week, everybody was convinced they're going to fucking hop in on GameStop and become goddamn millionaires.
Well,
That shit immediately it started going down because it was a fucking pump and dump.
exactly. And there's the there aren't really that many exceptions to the rule. It's a part of the long con to indicate or to insinuate to the people who are behind on getting their positions in that there are all of a sudden exceptions to the rule that they should invest in, without understanding that because the more powerful individuals, or because the more powerful quorum has basically agreed in theory and then through action to take their positions, to consolidate and subsequently manipulate what's been centralized. So, and then once it's been consolidated and centralized, it's so much easier to manipulate the thing that people are using to speculate on, which is either the pump and dump scheme, or it's, in this case, the Bitcoin or the Dogecoin. But also it makes it easier to manipulate the prices of goods and services, and then keep the value of the currency or the item that's being treated as a currency at a particular level.
There's one person sitting on 36 billion fucking Dogecoin, or one address. We don't know if it's a person. One goddamn address is sitting on 25 fucking % of the goddamn circulating supply. One fucking address. One. Not 100. One. So when we're talking about, oh, this is the biggest wealth transfer, that's beyond the fucking 1%. That person is beyond the 1%. When you have one fucking address sitting on 25% of the fucking supply of an entire currency, this is so absurd to watch, because I'm like sitting here. What I started doing is I started watching the rich people's quorum. You can get in these, like, you can read what these stocks are and Deloitte and what their fucking, their data projections are doing. I've had Deloitte analysts do research on my project, so I know how these motherfuckers operate. And this is where, if people want to get ahead of the curve, that's the shit they need to be fucking reading, not Wall Street Bets. What Wall Street Bets doing? Wall Street Bets is these motherfuckers getting out of their daytime trading jobs to then coordinate some shit behind the fucking scenes and then pretend they're real people manipulating and beating the big stockbrokers. It's so fucking stupid. I can't even express. Then they're gonna make a movie about it, make millions of dollars off of tricking people because they made a fucking movie. Who you think financing the goddamn film, y'all? Who you think financing? Some fucking poor people like us?
It's not GameStop.
Poor motherfuckers like us are financing. Yeah, we're gonna make money off of this film about GameStop. Fucking stock price going through the roof and the average Joe beating the fucking big companies that are gonna make millions of dollars off production. What?
SEC and the attorney generals are already looking for their pariah, and they've already found people to investigate. And SEC is actually combing through Wall Street Bets and dedicating time and resources to see like who broke rules, as opposed to actually going after the organizations that actually are manipulating the markets.
I've seen this movie before. You know what they're gonna do? They're gonna find him like $300,000. They're gonna find him like $300,000, and he's gonna have made like $47,700,000, and then he'll pay taxes on it because that's all they care about is the fucking money. That dude's not gonna. Nobody. I will bet money nobody is going to see jail time from this AMC GameStop shit. Because the only thing you have to do is pretend you believed in the company. And that's why he's not selling. He's just pulling off this final charade. Oh, I believe in GameStop. That's why it's not manipulating. Meanwhile, he's probably got a fucking burner account that he's using to actually sell a bunch of shit. He's got his main account. I guarantee you the motherfucker's got at least 3 burner, if not 5 burner accounts that he's using to actually sell. So then when he goes to trial, he can just point at this one account, be like, oh no, I didn't sell. I believed in GameStop. I believe in GameStop now.
I'm ruined.
Meanwhile, $100 million $150 million this motherfucker pocketed from his goddamn burner accounts. I guarantee it. And the thing is, people be like, oh, AML KYC, AML KYC. He probably got his fucking friend to do it. That's how you get a burner account using AML KYC. Get your friend to do it. That's all. That's all. You don't have to, you can't create a fake identity. But guess what? You get your best friend, you get your best friend's wife, you get your mom, you get your dad. They set up accounts and you trade using the account that they set up. And all of a sudden, because you paid them off and they don't give a fuck as long as they get their money, they don't give a fuck if it's a burner account, then you can be like, oh yeah, I didn't trade my GameStop. I just got my GameStop hasn't moved. None of it. Meanwhile, burner account. And he's paying off his fucking family members and friends. They're just dancing. They're like, oh yeah, we're part of that. Reading, seeing the fucking news stories. And this dude is not gonna see jail time because he's got a fucking account, a main account that he hasn't touched, so he can just finally, whenever they bring him to trial, be, oh yeah, no, I believe. That's the dumbass difference between going to jail and not. If he sold, I think even like 10% of the stock in his main account during all this, he could potentially see jail time because he's a former stockbroker. I mean, I think he's still operating.
So what can people do other than just try to get out, get their money back? Because it's never going to get that high again.
They can just hold. The issue is you don't actually have a loss until you sell.
Yeah. You just own something that's not as valuable as it once was.
Well, Chris, what you just described, multiply that by a factor of 10 or a factor of 100 and you get a bailout, essentially.
Basically.
You get a slap on the wrist and then you get a bailout. And some of these hedge funds, some of these trading management companies, these facilitation companies, they get to raise, $1 billion, or they get to raise, tens of billions of dollars to cover their losses on top of an investigation, and in which case they'll get fined a small fraction. And in that case, it's just what you described as a microcosm of the larger macrocosmic evaluation of what the economy is like and how the players in the economy survive and how they make their money and distribute their funds.
So here's the thing. This is not financial advice whatsoever. You never hear anybody talking about Maker. It's like number 24 on CoinMarketCap right now. There's only 995,000 Maker in existence. Like right now, circulating. Nobody ever talks about that shit because that's the one they're taking their fucking positions on. This is what the rich people do. They like find those that people aren't focusing on. They take their positions in those, and then in 3 months, oh, Maker's the next big thing. Oh, Maker's the next big thing. Meanwhile, motherfuckers like myself have been taking positions on it, knowing like that there's less than a million of them total. So yeah, once people find out that this one exists, of course they're gonna flock to it thinking that they can, like, it's going to be easier for Maker to hit 1 million than for Bitcoin to hit 1 million. But you never hear anybody talking like that because they're taking their positions right now, is what it comes down to. So this is the same type of shit. Like everybody, Dogecoin. Meanwhile, people like myself just stacking Maker. Like, again, it's like one of these things. I don't even like trading. I'm not gonna sit here and fucking miss the potential to make money while other people are doing it, because ultimately people need to understand trading is like wind sailing. You need to just go where the fucking wind is blowing, but understand that you need to read the maps to see the wind charts, to know that there's cycles, like wind moves in cycles. If you hit a vortex, you need to know how to get out of the fucking vortex to know the direction to go. So this is where people will jump in a fucking pump and dump right at the top and then sell at the bottom and then wonder what the fuck just happened to their money, how they just threw away $1,000. And it's like, you just didn't know the like wind patterns, and you fucking put your sail in the wrong direction and wound up in a fucking vortex is what happens. Again, this is like, trading should be seen like wind sailing. 100%. 100%. And the issue with wind sailing is if you have a destination, then you have to follow certain patterns. But if you're just in the middle of an ocean and the goal is to just go somewhere, you basically want to make sure you don't get stuck in a vortex. And people get in with no goals. They don't have an exit point. And that's the easiest way to end up in a fucking vortex. If you don't have an exit point on your fucking journey, you're just the wind will take you into a vortex eventually.
It sounds like, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is effectively why people have to be very self-aware when they get into shit like this. It's like, you know, you can't just jump into the ocean without a destination, because it will drag you out and fucking drown you. That's the way the ocean works.
It sounds like some industries are more susceptible to pump and dump schemes than other industries, or some currencies are more susceptible.
Nope. Nothing is more or less susceptible. Just throw that perception away. Everything is equally
if there's a market, it could be pumped and dumped.
In that you just don't know who owns what. There's no way to ever know who owns what. So in that, you cannot know what market forces are organic or are artificial. So you have to assume everything is equally as susceptible at a being manipulated. Like, otherwise, you put yourself in a position of false security.
It's so interesting, and I wonder about this. The use of a currency that is actively traded internationally in order to exchange that currency or invest that currency in something that is so easily manipulated. And that done on a massive scale across the globe. Now,
that's gambling.
It is gambling. I see that it's gambling, but how is it that there isn't? It sounds like there's constant volatility, and that anything other than that is just an illusion.
Yeah, of course. But people are conditioned to not see the volatility. And I keep trying to snap people out of this perception of stability. When the gas price changes, your dollar is changing value. That's what you're seeing. When your milk price changes, when your egg price changes, your dollar is changing value. You are conditioned to see that as the object changing value, but both things are changing value. It's not unilateral, or it's not one-sided equation. It's a two-sided equation. If the milk changes value, your dollar has just changed value. If the gas changes value, your dollar has just changed value. But we are conditioned in America to only see it as the object changing value, because they want us to see the dollar as a foundational currency from which the economy can have stability. Stability is a perception when it's not physically there. If there's not physically homeostasis in a system, you can achieve the perception of stability even when it's not there. And that's kind of where, for the last 400 years, if not longer, the West has been feigning stability when it's really hidden exploitation. In some cases, not even hidden. There's always been there's no fair trade. Fair trade is a term that only even emerged recently. Fair trade has never fucking existed. It still doesn't exist. So this is kind of where, when we're talking about actual stability, you can't have stability in the absence of fair trade. Otherwise, it's just exploitation. And this is why, when we're talking about, this is the difference between perceived stability and actual stability. All we've had so far is exploitative hierarchical caste systems. And that's not actual stability. It's artificial stability through oppression and exploitation, which is obviously not equality or stability as a species. That is not just unsustainable, it's not real stability.
Capitalism relies on a supply and demand, and it can't function really any other way. And we've reached a point where they have to artificially limit the supply. Otherwise, there is no demand. The demand is reduced, and you end up with diminished prices and abundance. And then apparently we can't have that.
And I to me, okay, this isn't my construction. The types of it's like, when we're looking at the Kardashev scale and we are a type 0 civilization, that means that we are not using energy efficiently as a species. I didn't come up with that construction. This is something that has been used to establish the framework in which we contextualize the evolution of our species. Our species is effectively at the very beginning of its potential for what it could be when it comes to harvesting and efficiently and effectively making use of energy at scale. That said, transitioning from type 0 to type 1 comes with the potential to destroy the entire species, because once you hit that scale of energy control, you get things like nuclear weapons. So the issue is that the whole reason they talk about, the doomsday clock, is because our species has a problem with perpetually framing things from the angle of fear. But further, there is no capacity to discuss utopian outcomes in the context of a caste system that desires to control a segment of the population with the pretense of attempting to attain that next level through this form of social construction. So capitalism was never going to get us to type 1 civilization. They wanted us to believe it would so we could exploit it. This is one of those things where, again, anything can be pumped and dumped, including the fucking singularity. The singularity got pumped and dumped. You got people like Joe Rogan, Ray Kurzweil. Unfortunately, Ray Kurzweil is a fucking genius, but unfortunately, this motherfucker pumped and dumped the singularity. People turned the singularity into this capitalist utopian vision around which they could sell all types of bullshit, whether it was cryo preservation or people who are selling like, we'll upload your consciousness to the cloud eventually. We'll figure it out. Just give us $100,000 now. We'll figure it out. And they do these things that use people's hopes and their dreams around whatever it becomes to then sell them bullshit so then they can pocket the money. So this is where, again, the transition from type 0 to type 1 got pumped and dumped. And that's not to say that it's not possible, but you had a bunch of charlatan-ass profiteers using many people's desire to transition to a higher level of species to then turn around and make it into a Ponzi scheme. And this is kind of where, again, now, like, if people are honest with themselves, obviously Joe Rogan is a piece of shit human being. Joe Rogan is a huge piece of shit human being. And he feigned philosophical exploration as a way to get a consumer base that he would peddle all the snake oil to. Joe Rogan sold his consumer base all the snake oil. I don't know if people remember the TV show Joe Rogan Questions Everything. Bullshit. Then they tried to come up with the Joe Rogan Daily online newspaper for some reason.
Wait,
immediately fucking failed. It was gone within the month. But there's all these things around which his agents or some executive tried to build things to make Joe Rogan something bigger than he needed to be, to the point where I don't know if people remember when Joe Rogan endorsed Ron Paul for president on, what was it, Tonight Show? A thing. Like, Joe Rogan endorsing somebody from president should never be a thing. Nobody should ever fucking care who Joe Rogan cares for as president. Nobody should have ever fucking cared. But we were made to think that Joe Rogan's opinion is somehow valuable for some reason because he's the common Joe. He dropped out of college, but he has all the questions. He's going to fucking put academia on.
Pumping and dumping personalities and people now.
Pumping and dumping academia.
So do you think that Joe Rogan would have ended up on a starship in the Federation?
If he would have been one of those motherfuckers.
The red shirts.
Actually a Cardassian that got changed into a human to infiltrate us, and we don't find out until season 3, and he's always done this questionable shit. And that's where, oh yeah, Joe Rogan was a Cardassian plant. I said the Kardashians first. Joe Rogan was always a Cardassian plant the whole time. The whole time. They modified his fucking DNA and appearance to make him look like us and get close enough, but just sow enough chaos that by the time we realize he's a Cardassian, we already got the fucking Maquis. We already got the rebels that are starting shit for no goddamn reason because they just want freedom. They want freedom. The Maquis were so fucking stupid.
Oh, man.
God damn it, Maquis. And this is where I'm saying, like, Joe Rogan has created this dumbass group of people that think that they were questioning everything, and then they became QAnon fucking junkies because they didn't actually have a logical framework from which they were actually working. It was always
critical thinking.
No, it was always circular logic without critical thought, but it was dressed up to be, oh, we're counterculture, we're counter academia. Academics don't ask these questions. That's why there's mainstream academia. Everybody's got the same opinion about evolution because nobody's asking these questions. But you dropped out, motherfucker. You don't know how this shit works. And this is the biggest paradox. Is like, fucking dropped out, and then he makes all this commentary about academia. He never made it that far. You can't be talking like, I train in Muay Thai, but I've never fought in the octagon, so I'm not going to talk like I have. You can't be doing that shit. If you never made it to grad school, you can't be talking like you know what the fuck grad students do. You don't know. It's way different than undergrad. It's completely different. Guess what? Nobody gives a fuck about undergrads' opinions because they don't know shit yet. They don't know what they don't know yet. So nobody gives a fuck about undergrads' opinions. And it's weird to be in college as an adult and like not have a valid opinion about something where you feel you should. But guess what? If you're an undergrad, you don't know shit yet. You don't know shit. You don't even know what you don't know. And this is where Americans are trained to like still have opinions about shit that they don't know about. It's so dumb. It's the dumbest anti-intellectual shit. Like, if you hold an opinion about something you're not educated on, you're a dumbass. You're a dumbass is what that comes down to. You can. I'm not saying you don't have the right, but if you do, you're a fucking idiot. if somebody forms an opinion about something they haven't learned about, they are a fucking idiot. Period.
Well,
Period. Period.
we live in a socioeconomic structure that is constantly pumped full of what the marketing machines of these multinational corporations do is they formulate people's opinions for them, and then they give them to them in 15-second or 30-second increments and intervals. And then people are essentially absorbing that information and using it to inform their opinions about how they should spend the money that's being manipulated as well.
Yeah, and I think again there's all these layers to it. It's not the Illuminati. That's not
No,
like
it's
you
not.
know.
It's a bunch of independent actors, I think. It's the quorum that we were talking about. It's the people who are holding the majority of the shares in each individual section of essentially the board. And when they come together in a particular direction, that's when they all decide to make, or they don't even have to make the decisions together. They just have to make decisions that are mutually beneficial at some point in time, and then turning profits as well.
And again, it's like, it'd be really easy if you could just go on Wall Street Bets and find the exact thing that they're going to do where, we talked about it last week. They have counter agents now. I mean, they were there the whole time, but it's like they're way more obvious when you know that they're planting information for other people to follow up on to then, influence the cycle again. It's like in the same way you don't know if the people saying hold the line were the stockbrokers or the actual people who thought that they were fucking making money. Like you just don't know.
And on top of the people who are involved in making money, there are the people who are plants for multimedia organizations as well, the people who are extracting the stories from the occurrences and using it to essentially influence public perception.
Yeah, and it's, you to think who those people are is really delusional, I think is the best way to say it.
It's not secure.
Yeah.
Well, these are the same people that, they know that GameStop is going to hit 1,000. And they know the election was stolen. That we can just throw everyone who makes some kind of outlandish assertion into this pit. That's how they get there.
Well, and then I think about also and wonder about the influence of religious organizations over the perceptions or the opinion formulation of people who are easily taken in by these manipulations.
Okay,
how does somebody with a strong religious conviction versus somebody who may not have a strong religious conviction, how can they also arrive at the same conclusions? What allows them to be both manipulated in the same way?
Apparently, the Catholic Church took in $3 billion in taxpayer-backed pandemic aid. So they're getting money from something.
They're probably getting money from people, entities, organizations, subsidies.
No. The Catholic Church took $3 billion in taxpayer-backed pandemic aid.
Taxpayer-backed.
Yeah. I was just trying to think in terms of like what kind of influence religious organizations have And I remember reading about this, earlier. They took in billions of dollars in pandemic relief. They have billions of dollars already. What the fuck?
Their pockets are deep.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me wonder, what are they pumping and dumping?
They had $10 billion in holdings. No,
Religion
they had
pumping
$10 billion in cash and other available funds. They didn't need to take $3 billion from taxpayers.
It's called the opium of the masses for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you want to get your streets paved with gold? Come to this corner. Want to get your 72 virgins? Come to this corner. Of course they're pumping and dumping religion too. It's like all these different. Anything can be pumped and dumped.
It's the rat race.
Yeah.
72 40-year-old virgin men.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like, I was always of the mind, there's only so many people you can convince to be suicide bombers before they're all gone. And it's like, they're gone. That's just they don't do that shit anymore because they're all fucking gone. So it's like, it's just, you kind of got to wait it out. You know what I mean? Like, but it's one of these things where, again, it's like, as soon as the last suicide bomber, the last person that could be convinced to blow themselves up for some dumbass shit is gone, every person from there on looks at that framing and is like, yeah, no thanks. No, why don't you blow yourself up? And then there's no more suicide bombers. So it's like,
What kind of?
we don't have fucking Japanese kamikazes anymore, right? No more kamikaze pilots. Yeah.
Well,
the
drones.
last one died. The last one who was like, yeah, I'll fly my plane into a fucking ship. Yeah, there's the last one of those people who was that dumb to fucking keep doing that shit. And then Japanese people en masse were like, yeah, no more. No, not one more Japanese person is ever going to fly a fucking plane into something on behalf of the government ever again. And there's no more kamikaze pilots. Because all the Japanese people from that point on were like, yeah, that's fucking stupid. That's dumb. No more.
And yet we glorify it in
American media.
Well, martyrdom is always such an interesting thing in terms of how it can be used to. We talk so much about how people are manipulated, but martyrdom and the compensations for martyrdom, the incentives for martyrdom across the globe are often, the things that are talked about the most in the media. We have martyrdom in our country in various forms. There's martyrdom in just about every country. People dying for a cause.
There's got to be some serious promises, though, to if you fly your plane into the deck of this aircraft carrier, we'll make sure you're well cared for in the next life. How does that even work?
Well, also the families of some of the people who do that are compensated.
Yeah,
after
pension.
the fact.
Your pension and your life insurance and all that shit. That's what they're thinking in modern times. Oh yeah, if I die in battle, my family will get $300,000. It'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. I'm worth $300,000. You know how much money $300,000 is? I've never felt that valuable in my life. People like be proud to die so their family can get like $250,000. It's so dumb. It's so dumb.
Well, that's what they'll make in 5 years.
Entirely. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
But they'll make that in 5 years with a normal job.
Yeah. No, it's so dumb. Like the idea of people dying for shit. Because this is where we don't get a chance to really step back as human beings and ask, what is our species doing? What are we doing? What is happening? Humans, what are we doing? Like, what is the end? What's the end game here for our species? What? There is no fucking goal. We have no goal as a species. And we're all just kind of like floundering around day to day as if our governments have not made a common goal, as if our governments are not still trying to fucking send us to die for them for no fucking reason because they have no. And that's where, again, it's like, this is why dying for shit is fucking stupid because there's no fucking reason. That's where I'm like, nobody should be dying for anything in 2021. Nothing is worth dying for. Literally nothing is worth dying for in this fucking world, in this entire planet. It is not worth it. None of it. None of it. Not a flag, not a nation, not a fucking religion, not a family crest. None of it is worth dying for. And the idea that dying for something is honorable is fucking stupid. It's fucking dumb. Galileo was a dumbass. And I'm saying that shit in 2021 because nobody else will. Dying for shit is not honorable. It's dumb. It's fucking stupid. We are not Klingons. We are not fucking Klingons.
Yeah.
No hill should be died on for anything anymore. Period.
I just read so many people on the internet who are like ready, you know, they're dying for a you know, to be served at a restaurant.
Get a haircut.
They're dying to get haircuts.
They're dying to go to the movies.
Dying to go to a movie.
Little Bow Wow concerts.
They're dying to go to a Little Bow Wow concert.
People were dying at political rallies.
They're dying to go to do all the things that they want to do, and then they end up going home and killing their family. Should have worn a mask.
Or they were dying because they visited their family.
Oh yeah, that too.
They're dying because of a cookout.
The numbers aren't getting better. They've just stabilized long enough that we're starting to get used to it again. It's kind of fucked up. I read something about estimates, like World Health Organization estimates on how long this will take to resolve, put us deep into 2028. Back on a global level. Because there are places that have no infrastructure to distribute the vaccine, and they have no money to secure vaccines.
Like America.
Yeah, well, you know, they say that we're going to be hitting our numbers in stride soon, and that eventually, you know, it shouldn't take much longer than a year or two.
You mean the amount of time it takes for both of the variants to multiply yet again?
Yeah.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
Huh. I hope those are not resistant to this current vaccine.
Oh, like is it the African or the South American variant that is resistant to the spike protein mRNA treatment? I know it's one of them.
I don't know, man.
That shit's so depressing. It's like
the ones that emerge this year aren't resistant to the vaccine.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's gonna take, because I saw the last estimates I saw. Yeah, it was like 1 million people a day, roughly, in America. So yeah, it's about a year, because they've gotten like 36 million, I think, total so far.
Yep.
Which is atrocious. That's atrocious. That only 36 million people. Basically, what is it, California? I mean,
California's got 39 million.
Oh yeah, little less than. They haven't even finished California yet. Not even finished fucking California.
Let's see.
For some perspective, we got 49 more motherfucking states.
Well, they could have finished Texas by now, and Florida, and New York. Illinois, pretty much every other state. Holy, I mean, I get it. California is a big place. Texas is a big place. New York's a big place, but they've got
Texas is thinking about seceding from the country.
Texas.
Yeah.
Who in Texas is talking about seceding from the United States? Do they really think that they understand the complexity of setting up all of those like trade agreements that the United States handles with their blanket agreements? They're not going to be able to handle interstate trade with the United States and like in Mexico and all the rest of the world. They don't want to trade with the rest of the world.
The Texas Republican Party has endorsed legislation that would allow state residents to vote whether to secede from the United States.
Oh Lord.
The party chair, Texans have a right to voice their opinions on this critical issue.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think they realize how quickly Mexico would take their asses over.
yeah. Texas minus federal funding to secure the border. Let's see how that goes.
It's so delusional for Texans to think, oh, we got our guns. We'll take on the Mexicans. We'll take on Americans. And that's how they totally fucking think of themselves as like the state that can fight anybody because they have guns. And this is where, again, it's like the idea that you think that your guns are going to protect you from infrastructural failures or like preserve your economy and trade lines and shit like that is like these cowboys, these wannabe ass cowboys and their gunslinging approach to everything. It's really ridiculous. Like, not all Texas people are absurd, but most of them are.
I think it's the same syndrome as Florida man. There's Texas man. Florida man and Texas man are somehow related, and they're both crazy in their own ways.
Well,
and we hear
it's
about
like,
Texas man and Florida man because they're the ones that stand out because they're willing to do the crazy dumb shit like drive their giant lifted black truck 80 miles, 100 miles an hour, and then fly off the off ramp, and then somehow manage not to hit anyone and come into a screeching halt right in front of the 7-Eleven, and then they tear off, and no one gets hurt, but it's terrified everybody.
It's like Texas got all of the worst genetic mutations from Florida, but they got all this self-absorbed self-righteousness from New York. It's like the horrible mix.
What's crazy is they don't like to be told what to do. Like, that's the main driver. It's like, don't tell us what to do. We want to do whatever we want to do. And they're being manipulated constantly by their elected representatives to vote for them and to keep voting for them because they project this. The elected representatives continue to project this image of, well, we don't do what people tell us to do. Whereas they all do what they're supposed to do, and they all tell people what to do.
There's irony that Joe Rogan, aka the Alpha or Sigma man's man, or whatever that dumbass bullshit is saying now, moved to Texas to be different from Hollywood and be unique, but all his like followers want to do the same dumbass shit. It's like they all have the same dumbass hopes and same basic caveman dreams, and then want to think that they're individuals. Like, you all want the same shit. You all want a kettlebell and some nootropics and some fucking
invest in psychedelic stuff.
I have my podcast about my third eye and want to pretend they're all woke and shit. But then at the end of the day, they're all just fucking cishet white males that want to preserve the patriarchy.
They're probably all moving to Texas so that they can build a tent city around Joe Rogan's house and live together.
No, they'll have a pop-up warehouse. It's Texas. Think bigger. Tents aren't big enough.
I mean, he always talks about creating a compound and shit. He like, I used to go on the Joe Rogan forum, but I started getting like weird cultish vibes around, what was it, like 2016, I think. And at some point, like his forum was so rife with white supremacists that they just basically had to shut it down. And it was like there was a sticky post like no racism, no racist bullshit, because racism had gotten so bad on the forum. It was like as if Stormfront had just migrated to the Rogan forum. And it was
Wait, was that around the same time that Stormfront collapsed because the people that were running it
I think it was.
weren't getting enough donations?
Yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence. But it got so bad that they just had to basically shut the forum down. And it was one of these things where he tried to act like it did. He acts like that shit never existed now because it became such a cesspool for white supremacists. Like, I want to say 50 to 70% of the incel Jordan Peterson problem is directly because of Joe Rogan, because he was, I mean, he kind of still is a Jordan Peterson advocate, but it's like all that stuff basically spawned from the Rogan board, and it's mainly because Joe Rogan became such an advocate of Jordan Peterson and was giving him such a platform in America. Because nobody in America knew who the fuck Jordan Peterson was before Joe Rogan. They had seen the video of him getting hit with the fucking bike lock or whatever, but nobody knew who the fuck that dude was. They just knew, oh, you're that dumbass dude that got hit with the bike lock during a fucking protest because you were saying some dumbass shit. And then you find out, like, Jordan Peterson's Canadian. What the fuck is he doing making all this commentary about American academia as if it's the same? Because American academia and Canadian academia are definitely not the same for various reasons. But all the shit he's talking about, it's like meant to undermine the credibility of academics, to frame it as if he's been shut out. But it's because he's not even American. So it's like him coming here and then being like, oh, academia is shutting me out. It's completely disingenuous. But again, you have fucking college dropouts like Joe Rogan, who don't know what the fuck he's talking about, not able to check him on it, then promoting it because it makes Joe Rogan feel better about not completing his fucking degree, and be like, oh yeah, fuck these institutions. I didn't want my shit anyway, so that's why I dropped out, not because I couldn't do it, not because I was not capable. It's because these institutions are the problem.
So Stormfront shut down at the end of August 2017, and the Joe Rogan message boards, they shut down sometime in May 2018.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yep. So
'cause he acted like that shit never even existed. It's like, I mean, there was so much open Nazism and anti-Semitism on that board by the time it shut down. Like, yeah, it's almost impossible that it wasn't just people migrating from the Stormfront. Really, the way it shut down, because then, like I said, because he was balding and shaved his head and started saying super questionable shit. You know, there was a time when he talked about watching Planet of the Apes in a black neighborhood theater. And I was like,
what?
This is weird. This is a weird conversation to be having. Because then he started making all this commentary about the audience and how it's different to watch movies with black people. And that's when I started looking at his commentary and be like, is he using black comedians as a shield to say racist shit? And that's when I started realizing, yes, he is in fact using black comedians as a shield to say racist shit. So he would bring on people like Charlie Murphy, John Witherspoon. There's a few other ones, but ultimately, like, Joe Rogan is most certainly a racist in his core. He doesn't believe he's a racist at his core, which is why he then continues to use comedy as a shield to say racist shit. Because then if you go look at his comedy, it's super fucking racist. Like, it's just racist. There's no way around it. Like, it's not really funny. It was shock. A lot of it was shock comedy. But then you like hear some of the bits he would have about dropping a weed bomb on the Middle East as if like America didn't create all the fucking terrorist problem over there. Like, you know, the way he would frame things is as if like people in the Middle East need this weed bomb to calm down, and it's not American imperialism that created the problem. And it's like when you hear shit like that, him turning it into jokes because either he's 100% ignorant about it, or he knows just enough to appeal to racists and make it look like he's just feigning jokes. That's when I started to look back and be like, who is this dude's audience? Who is he trying to appeal to? Because then it became apparent to me that he's definitely appealing to fucking racists. And that's who his audience became. And he tried to act like, oh no, I'm friends with black people. I'm not racist. I have black comedians I support. I'm not racist. Meanwhile, he's like using all this coded language to bring in anti-Semites and people who hate black people as his main audience fan base, which includes a lot of Mexicans. Like, let's keep it real. There's a lot of racist ass Mexicans that hate black people, and there's a huge tension between the black and Mexican communities in certain areas because of this racism. So it goes both ways now, but it's because it's there. And the issue is a lot of second and third generation Mexicans won't identify as white. So you get a lot of Mexican Americans who don't know Spanish, call Mexicans beaners, shit like that. And they'll talk shit about other Mexicans and hate on black people, call black people nigger and shit like that because they're trying to identify as white. So there are a whole group of Mexicans. I mean, it's not just Mexicans. There's black people who hate themselves too. That's why the Uncle Ruckus character is funny, because you get black Nazis and black people who like want to go be a part of the KKK. You get Jews who want to be Nazis and shit like that. There's weird ass people out there, and it's not mental illness in every case. And that's why it's like you don't want to conflate racism with mental illness, because that undermines people with mental illness. But the issue is, obviously no one's homogenous, and then it gets really confusing when you start including these people who are like willing to go on the Joe Rogan show and then say fucked up shit about black people to then make it look like, oh, like Candace Owen. Candace Owen was one of the people he's had on there multiple fucking times. Why is Joe Rogan bringing Candace Owen? And then, oh, I'm very liberal in my perspective on social stuff. Fuck out of here, Joe Rogan. You aren't liberal. You fucking pretend to liberal, pretend to libertarian. He ain't even a real libertarian. Because the thing is, libertarians, I mean, well, most libertarians are racist. They just don't want to admit it, is what it comes down to. Like 95% of libertarians are just racist and don't want to own up to it. And then they want to hide behind shit like, well, if there was slavery, then everybody could be a slave. So it's not really against black. So it's okay. So you hear libertarians say dumbass shit like that. Libertarians are not against slavery most of the time. And that's why you end up with like people who will pretend they're against slavery in public, but when you really press them on it, they're okay with it. And those are the motherfuckers that are like libertarian. And then this is the Joe Rogans that then have their Candace Owen on as fucking representatives for black people, as if that's not undermining the entire black community when he gives her a fucking platform. So it's like, I realized as I was a fan of his for a very brief window, but it was because he was feigning this image of equality, of being an ally to people that he was most certainly not, and was then moving to undermine their communities by pretending he was their ally. And that's when I started realizing, like, oh, this is a dangerous motherfucker. Joe Rogan is not innocuous. Joe Rogan is super dangerous because then he uses comedy as a shield to do all this shit. Oh, no, it's just comedy. Then you find out people in his circle like Brian Callen, you know, using comedy as like a front to do obscene shit. The Louis C.K.'s. Oh, yeah, he was friends with Louis C.K. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's all these people that you find out he's friends with or was friends with that then we're using the front of comedy to do obscene shit because that's what happens when you're complicit with using comedy to undermine people in the first place. And I think that's where it's like Joe Rogan holds this weird place in society because he only really influences like 4 to 5 million people. Well, maybe like 10 at this point.
Hey, apparently
There's
he
like-
made some transphobic remarks.
Oh, fuck yeah, of course. He's
Holy
super
shit.
transphobe. He brought on this dude, Zuby. This dude's a huge transphobe. And then this dude was like, oh, I'm going to identify as a woman and set the record for weightlifting. And then he brought on that dude to fucking make fun of it. Fuck Joe Rogan. He's a huge transphobe. And he'll say a bunch of transphobic shit and then apologize. I don't even know if he apologized for it. Because then he was very against Fallon Fox fighting. And then he finally talked to a doctor about it. And the doctor was like, yeah, your perspectives are wrong. So he adjusted his perspectives on that. But I think it was only after Fallon Fox lost. And the issue was because he had such an influence, when you have somebody who is a big voice in fighting, who's also has a large following, when they are making comments that are unscientific, saying, oh, somebody who's trans has an advantage because they were used to be a man, so their bone density is more. That's not even accurate because when you start transitioning and you start taking hormones, that shit changes almost immediately. It's like a very short window between when you start taking hormones and your bone density starts changing in either direction. If you're a woman and you start taking testosterone, your bones get denser. If you're a man, you start taking estrogens, your bones get less dense. It goes both ways. So this is where when people are like, oh, women who transition as men have a less advantage, that's not even fucking scientifically accurate. So you have people like Joe Rogan making these inaccurate statements and then his audience taking them as gospel. So then you turn around and then having people like him bringing on people and then making transphobic, unscientific commentary. The math doesn't work. The math does not work. Because here's how you break it down. If you're saying that a man has an advantage over women because when he transitions, his bones are more dense, but then a woman transitioning to a man can't compete because they'll never have as much bone density, then they're saying the transition never actually happens on a cellular level, which is just scientifically inaccurate. Their hormone levels change, their bone density changes, and their structure like you can't yet modify someone's chromosomes, but they are changing on a cellular level. There's a difference between a chromosomal level and a cellular level.
What's the window for CRISPR to modify genetics like that? That would have to be done really. That would have to be done before preconception, right?
No,
or during conception.
That's not true.
When would that have to take place?
And this is the issue. Like, we as a species we still don't understand evolution completely. Lamarckian evolution is a real thing, which is why if a domestic pig is released into the wild, they turn into a feral hog, and it's like basically a boar within like 3 weeks, because evolutionary changes can happen postpartum. Like every evolutionary change does not happen on a phenotype level. It can happen, or it doesn't always happen on a genotype level. It can happen on a phenotype level, and the phenotype can change after birth. That is something that we have a hard time dealing with, which is why Lamarckian evolution is something that we don't really get into until you're more advanced, which is why nobody gives a fuck about undergrad shit. Going full circle. It's like when you're going into undergrad, you probably don't know about Lamarckian evolution yet because you're just not advanced enough to understand. Like, yes, evolution happens on a cellular level between generations, but it also can happen on an individual level in response to selective or environmental pressure. That shit can happen. So when we're talking about CRISPR modifications, I think they have actually modified something after birth with CRISPR, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to do more research, like but I'm fairly positive I recall it was something that had already been born that had been modified, but it was like
Everything I've read about CRISPR has been sensationalized, so I'm not even sure how much
Yeah.
is, meat or potatoes.
right. And again, it's like a lot of times we're reading secondhand sources, and I'm not gonna pretend I'm like literate enough to read a primary source on genetic modification and 100% understand it. Like I'm not gonna lie to people or be that delusional in myself, which a lot of people would. And it's like, oh, I can read the words, I can look them up, but you
I
don't
think
fucking
I could
understand that
spend.
shit 100%.
I think maybe after like 10 years of guided study, you might be able to.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe. Like, yeah, I'm gonna understand this shit as well as the person who wrote the paper. Nah, fuck out of here. Without your bioengineering degree. If you ain't got a bioengineering degree and you're trying to tell people about CRISPR, you're an asshole. I mean, not saying that either one of us is an asshole, because we're not trying to tell people the intricacies of how it works. That's not what we're doing. And that's kind of the difference between us and Joe Rogan.
I think CRISPR is one of those. I think it's better in science fiction right now than it is in science fact. It's like so much technology itself is actually better in the vapor stage, where it's still only limited by imagination before engineers and scientists who are actually researching it get involved and say, well, that actually doesn't work, or this doesn't actually happen. And then once those realities start to emerge or start to become more obvious, then I don't know. It's hard to sensationalize things that aren't sensational. I think that's why that's not really part of the news anymore. You think that if that stuff was really going to be beneficial in a way that wasn't, or that, no, I'm sorry, I got to rethink that. If they could make money on it, they would be.
CRISPR?
Yeah.
A lot of money was made on CRISPR, especially the company.
Yeah, but
in the biotech industry, a lot of money changed hands.
Sure, it changed hands within that industry, but how much does it help anyone else? Does it really help people?
It's
not in the media anymore. Like, it's not part of the big science dialogue because COVID.
That's true. It's not in that big science dialogue. It was in the Nobel Prize dialogue, though.
Yeah. Does Nobel Prize even matter anymore?
I mean, I'm looking at an article now. One of the value propositions, if you want to call it that, is that they can modify animals or vegetables to yield more, to help reduce poverty rates.
Well, that's good. That's real good. You just got to get past the anti-GMO crowd.
Right, yeah. I mean, but again, this is where humans can't really eat natural food. Almost everything we eat has to be artificially selected, because this is where, again, the people who are anti-GMO don't know plants are bred, or
People who
how
are
veg-
anti-GMO don't want to sacrifice their cauliflower, cabbage, or Brussels sprouts and eat
or
nothing
bananas,
and
or
eat nothing but
strawberries, or
mustard
oranges.
flowers.
I think people fail to realize how many fruits and vegetables that we eat had to be selectively bred in order to get them to a point where they're actually edible to humans. Like,
There's the Brazil nut. It's one of my favorite nuts. It's big and hearty, and apparently it has to be cooked properly because it will kill you. Like it contains cyanide or something, and so it's got to be processed just right. I always wonder about. It's like I wonder when they stopped selectively breeding that one. They said, okay, this is enough. I mean, all we got to do is process it, or are they just trying to get the cyanide out of it or the poison? Now I got to find out what it is.
Recently read that, speaking of cyanide, there
Selenium. It contains a lot of selenium.
Selenium.
Selenium toxicity from Brazil nuts. You got to cook it. Huh.
Speaking of heavy metals, congressional report found many of the products made by the country's largest commercial baby food manufacturers contain significant levels of toxic heavy metals, including arsenic, lead, cadmium, mercury. Currently there doesn't appear to be any mandatory testing for heavy metals in baby food in this country, which is insane. I don't know if there ever was. There had to have been something. That's insane.
Yeah, I know. Like a lot of the supplements, like the workout supplements, will have heavy metals in them because they don't clean the labs and shit.
Yeah, a lot of supplements aren't regulated by FDA. Like if they were made, they can say on the bottle that they're manufactured according to good manufacturing practices, but if they're not manufacturing according to the good manufacturing practices for drugs and biologics, then it's so easy to just blow things off and not test for the heavy metals or to fake results of analytical testing during manufacturing. It's like fraud, essentially. But if they're not regulated by law, by federal law, then the penalties are much lower.
Yeah, it says they found heavy metals in 40% of protein powders tested.
Oh my God.
Yeah. 55% had measurable levels of BPA, which is a known endocrine disruptor.
EPA comes from heating plastics of a
Oh God. Oh Jesus Christ. Substantially elevated levels of lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, and BPA. 75% had measurable levels of lead. Oh, this is why I stopped drinking protein powders. I knew there was a reason. Because I was using them for a while, and then I stopped. I think it was pretty hard stop when this study came out. This is about 2018. Yeah, I haven't really touched them since because their industry is not regulated well.
EPA is a weak synthetic estrogen.
Well, and then you find out because these labs are also doing illicit shit, that some of the supplements would then get tainted with androgesterone or actual testosterone. So it's like, oh, you think you're taking a supplement? Like, no, you're juicing, motherfucker. Like you're actual juicing on accident, but then you like getting all these results and you keep taking it and
quote unquote by accident.
right. Yeah.
It's
No.
quite possible that, they're just turning a blind eye by design if they're really that corrupt.
Well, I mean, in some cases, but in other cases, they're being tested. So like, Romero is a great example. He got popped for, I forget, it was some kind of steroid, but he claimed it was from tainted supplement. So what they do when an athlete claims it's a tainted supplement, they will go to the shelf and take like a random sample of the item, and if it's like, I think they take like 30 packages or something, and it has to go above a certain percentage of random painting to actually validate that claim. Well, it turns out this thing that he was taking was actually tainted on the shelves. So he won like $27 million in damages against the company that was putting out this tainted supplement because he was a professional athlete that had to get tested. Well, it's been really difficult for him to get the payments, but it's like he's supposed to have been compensated for the damages against his reputation and against his potential earnings in his career because he was validated that he did take a tainted supplement. Because when you're at that level and you're thinking that you're following the rules and then they do that shit, yeah, it could cost you millions of dollars, which that Yoel Romero case proved. And that's kind of where, knowing that the Yoel Romero thing happened, it's like if that shit hadn't happened in such recent history, I would assume that all the people taking the tainted supplements were doing it as a roundabout way of getting juiced. But knowing how much it didn't ruin his career, but it raised a lot of red flags around him, and it did kind of ruin his reputation for a bit. Like, yeah, you can't, there's people at a certain level where if they're not actively trying to juice and they accidentally take a tainted supplement, like that shit could end their career. And that is a very serious potential risk in the market where, these companies just are not regulated at all. But that's also why it's like, man, I used to take that shit, but I just stay away from it. I can't.
It just blows my mind that it's still a thing. Like at some point, people have to understand that their bodies aren't supposed to be like that. I mean, it can, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean it should.
You remember Hydroxycut?
Oh God.
I had a friend who was taking that shit in like between high school and college, and he lost people? I think probably 60 pounds just taking it, and he wasn't working out at all. And I just remember thinking like, this can't be fucking healthy.
Yeah, it killed like 150 people.
Right. Yeah, it was like killing people.
Yeah,
because he worked at GNC, so he would get that shit at a major discount, and he was like their walking proof because I think he
causes like liver damage.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It like fucks you up internally, but that brief window where I remember they were pushing it hard because it gave you results, and nobody was like questioning that shit. And I just remember I tried it, and I just remember being like, this feels like what crack is probably like. Right? And I just remember this can't be healthy. This can't be healthy. It's like making your heart, giving you heart palpitations and make you sweat for no fucking reason. And I just remember like, I'm so glad I did not take it consistently, but I just remember like wondering why people weren't asking what the fuck is in that shit. Because Anna Nicole Smith started taking that shit. And she was like, it was like one of the brands that she was the spokesmodel for, and she lost a bunch of weight. And I'm just like,
And then she
I don't-
died.
yeah, like that don't seem fucked up to y'all. And it was just weird to see Americans not quit. I just am never, I never cease to be amazed at like how Americans will do some shit without questioning the underlying principles of something. But hydroxycut specifically was that was just mind opening because yeah, people then started dying from that shit.
Well, full circle, like you said, people are getting their opinions fully formed and prepackaged in a commercial, and they see those results and think they don't have to look any further.
You mean I can drink this shake and get in shape?
Yeah, that's what people are looking for. They're
Wait.
not looking for the changes to their diet. They're not looking to make any meaningful differences to their lifestyle. They just want to take something easy and then have a result. They want to eat the food that burns the fat. They don't want to eat food and exercise and understand that that burns fat or changes your body structure and composition.
Yeah, the keto diet's the one that puts your body into a near diabetic state so you can burn fat efficiently. Get
Well, that's dangerous. Isn't
get
it?
get extra ketones in your system and enter ketosis. Ketosis?
Well-
Ketoacidosis? Something like that.
I had been thinking about this because one of my friends has been monitoring his weight, and he realized his scale was set to female, and when he changed it to male, it like drastically changed his results. So we're trying to figure out like why that would cause such a drastic difference, and the only thing we could conclude was that the algorithm must work with certain assumptions based on the feedback if it's a male, and work with certain assumptions based on the feedback if it's a female. And then I realized, I'm like, well, then that's just the sampling bias, because then that means they didn't sample any women who lifted weights. Because it's like, at a certain point, the body composition shouldn't, like if a person's 29% body fat, they're 29% body fat. If they have 8% visceral body fat, they have 8% visceral body fat. It shouldn't actually matter if that person is a male or female if we're sampling their fat. But if the algorithm that's calculating the feedback has only a certain sample from which they're working, then it's going to interpret them in a certain way. So then that's where it's like, women bodybuilders weren't really a thing. Like there were women bodybuilders.
So not only is it like
Like women bodybuilders have always existed, but it wasn't a cultural thing up until like the 90s, really. You had women working out at Muscle Beach, getting fit, but actual women bodybuilders weren't really like a thing until the 90s. So you're not even going to have that big of a sample group from which you can say, oh, this is what it looks like if a woman is 180 pounds and she's been lifting weights for like 15 years. Like we don't have enough of a sample group for the scales to then do the Vulcan sweat test or whatever, vulcanized sweat. Like there's just not enough samples to say, oh, this is what a woman's BMI is if she works out constantly and becomes 180 pounds. And all of the scales that we're working with are working from this model of not having a large sample group of women lifting weights. It was like uncouth for women to lift weights because for so long there was this notion that like if a woman lifted weights, she would start to look manly, which is obviously not true, but we didn't have enough data for people to invalidate that claim until enough women were lifting weights to be like, oh yeah, that's not how that shit works. You gotta take steroids. Like if you look like a man, testosterone, and that's why we
So
now we know when people transition and take testosterone, it changes their facial structure. It
American
changes
Gladiators was on the air
Yes.
from like 1989 through 96.
Yep, that's
and,
what I was thinking. That's exactly
and
what I
during
was
the
thinking of.
first, I was looking for images from the early years, and
They
even the
weren't big.
men still look normal. And it's not
Yeah,
until
'cause
like
they had juicing yet.
yeah, it's not until like the middle of the 90s that they all start getting extra.
And that's exactly when like the Bash brothers,
Like they really
Jose
start looking
Canseco,
extra.
Mark McGuire, Barry Bonds, when all their heads started getting huge, that's when like other, it was because of abuse of steroids. I don't know if y'all remember the Ben Affleck after TV special, the Roid Rage. Y'all remember that?
No.
That is when the roid started. That's when the roid abuse started. It go like whenever. Let me look.
Yeah, man, the American Gladiators were like normal. They were big, they were athletic, but they weren't like giant until middle of the show's run.
19.
That's crazy. Let's see here.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of it, but then there was also one with I think it was Tracy Gold where she played bulimic. You guys remember that one?
No.
Yeah, there was like a couple like after school special films about like roid rage and bulimia and shit like that where they were trying to make people aware of these problems that were like popping up in
Oh, from Growing
Suburbia.
Pains. I remember her. Man, things that I weren't even on my radar.
Oh, For the Love of Nancy is the anorexia bulimia movie. Yeah. That was 1994. 94.
Lifetime Stories, Families in Crisis, A Body to Die
Yeah,
For.
1992. Yep. A Body to Die For,
A Body
the
to
Aaron
Die
Henry
For.
story. But yeah, like 1992 is really when steroid abuse started getting bad enough that they had to get Ben Affleck to.
It was so
Start-
bad that Lifetime made a movie about it.
Yeah, and he was like, I mean, that's the shit that they made fun of on South Park
Yeah.
when what was it, Jimmy started roiding out and he's like beating his girlfriend. Like they're directly mocking that movie. I guess. Oh, that one. Okay, 1994 is when that one came out.
Deadly Cost of a Killer Bod. Roid Rage. It gets 5 out of 10 stars on IMDb. Oh.
Yeah. I mean,
No, 6.1.
if you haven't seen the scenes that are the most egregious overacting, you definitely need to screen those. Not the whole film necessarily, but screen the Ben Affleck roid rage scenes because they are fucking hilarious. Like in retrospect, it's just absolutely hilarious that somebody who then probably actually ended up later using steroids for his acting roles in this scene. Well, because that's another issue is like I was looking at the Escape from New York and Escape from LA. What Hollywood expected from action heroes before steroids is so completely different now. Like Kurt Russell as an action hero, he looks like some dude that just walked in off the street. Like now, whereas then he's like the buff hero. In 1981 or whenever that film was released, Kurt Russell was considered buff enough to be an action hero. Now that dude ain't shit. Like the Snake Plissken from 1981, he looks like a schlub compared to action stars now. He looks like a straight schlub. Straight up.
No,
He's not an action star.
no. That's a very good observation. I remember thinking that Daniel Craig was the first Bond that actually looked like he could deliver and take the beating that Bond was delivering and receiving, and could actually do those things. He was actually he looked physically capable. Whereas I just didn't believe that Roger Moore was capable of that kind of hand-to-hand combat.
Pierce Brosnan?
Pierce Brosnan is not capable of that kind of hand-to-hand combat. Timothy Dalton's not capable of that hand-to-hand combat.
George
Lazenby might have actually been capable of that hand-to-hand combat, but we'll never know because he only gave us one movie, and it was like the one where Bond got married. So it's like the anti-Bond movie.
I feel like if you hit Pierce Brosnan in the face, he'd cover his face and say, "Ow, you hit me! You hit me!"
Matador.
That's how I imagine Pierce Brosnan reacting to getting hit in the face. You hit me! Not punching back or blocking it and countering. Like, no. Well, and this is funny where Matt Damon, as Jason Bourne, was able to convince people that he could be that dude.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's because like him and Ben Affleck basically were like Boston dudes. Like they're massholes. Like they're massholes. If you know what a masshole is, yeah, a masshole could probably do that. You know what I'm saying? Not to say that every masshole is trained in martial arts, but it's like
Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Mark. Yeah, he'll fuck. He did. He got in trouble for fucking somebody up as a kid. So yeah, of course, Mark Wahlberg can be cast as an action hero, and you can believe that he'll fuck somebody up because he used to do that shit when he was a kid. Just like I bet Matt Damon and Ben Affleck used to go around fucking with people because they're massholes. So yeah, I'm gonna believe Matt Damon or Ben Affleck can be Batman because like when they were kids, they were probably fucking douchebag bullies. Yeah, I can believe that. Yeah. So it's like one of these things where, again, it's like, you know, not to say, okay, I don't believe Matt Damon was a douchebag bully. He probably hung around the douchebag bullies and laughed about their stuff. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's like different levels where to survive in Boston, you got to be a masshole. Otherwise, like, people are going to pick on you. That's the way Boston is. That's why they're called massholes, right? Like, you know, masshole didn't come out of nowhere. I didn't make that shit up. No. I wish I could be that witty to come up with something that fucking hilariously accurate.
I'm familiar with masshole in terms of drivers, people operating vehicles.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just this morning, I was out driving on some errands, and there was this utility van that literally accelerated at a stale red light and just drove right through it, and then accelerated at another stale red light and just drove right through it.
That's some masshole shit right there.
Does not care one bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the whole friendliness quotient, you know, here in the Northeast is totally different, especially in Boston. That's one of the first things I noticed after I moved back is like the people here just, they don't want to hear about your day. They don't give a shit. They're suspicious if you say hi to them in a nice way. They're suspicious if you hold the door open for them.
Yeah. Rightfully so, man. Rightfully so. Because that's where it's like, yeah, you can't really be walking around on the streets of Boston and like have your head up your ass because somebody will just take your wallet or some shit. It's not to say that it's not to say that there's crime everywhere. It's just a matter of like, if you are aloof in Boston, you stand out is what happens. And then people will target you and fucking have your wallet by the time you realize, oh, I was looking for Panera Bread. I just had my wallet in my hand. I don't know what fucking happened. Somebody ran by and took my wallet. And it's these dumbass people that go to places like Boston and then act like they're in a small rural town or some shit and then try to behave that way.
Well, those people only stick to very specific parts of the city where that behavior is tolerated.
Yeah, it's like the safaris. They're on a
Basically,
small town.
basically. Or they show up on buses and the bus stays at a place and it just anchors them in one area and they're like, don't go too
They
far.
all have a bright green hat.
I'm here for a Red Sox game. I want to see the Red Sox play.
I want a Fenway Frank.
Right. Yeah, and those are the people that if they like stray off the beaten path, they end up buying some scalp tickets to the thing that they already had tickets for. It's like it's crazy what happens when people get in like the
They buy counterfeit souvenirs. They buy counterfeit souvenirs from every counterfeit souvenir salesperson along the path up leading to the game.
This guy's selling Oakley sunglasses for $10. I'd never seen such a deal in my life.
They sell counterfeit souvenirs in like malls and thoroughfares. There's like a stall in this one mall that was like selling Red Sox logo look-alike gear, and I looked at the inside of it and it didn't say MLB on it or anything, and I was like, yeah, I'm not getting it.
It says something like MLD or NLD.
It just had some like crappy woven tag.
Yeah, it's a Boston Red Sox hat, but has an NHL tag on the inside.
And then
It's the hat that you wear. It's the hat that you wear when you want to show that you have no idea what you're wearing.
and then you try to put the hat on and your head goes right through the seams. Stitched together properly, and that's why it costs $7 or whatever. You're like,
No, it costs $25.
Oh yeah, I haven't been to Boston in a while, so I don't know what the inflation's like. But,
Oh, the inflation is through the roof. Everything's costing a lot more out here.
yeah, I guess hats probably do cost.
Well, especially if you can convince somebody that it's gear,
Yeah,
that it's official. If you can even hint at its official status.
Then then they'll also pay a premium to go to the Sam Adams Brewery and buy beer that's no different than the beer in their bottles that you get at a store. Just costs more. And you have to drink it around a bunch of loud people. I'm not into Sam Adams though, so I'm not that market.
There's so many breweries out here. There's like brewery tours. People go on there's breweries for like every neighborhood in Boston, Massachusetts. There's a brewery.
The brewery walk.
well, the thing I thought was like the green. What is it? The Green Dragon Inn or something, where they have the Green Dragon Ale, where the founding fathers planned the revolt or some shit, or they
I
like.
think I've been there.
But that was like, the one place I did have interest in going, and there because they used the same brew that they used 300 years ago.
Oh,
it
they're the same
felt-
yeast. The yeast in time.
Yeah,
Cool.
I mean, I don't think it's the same yeast. It's the same recipe, not
Oh,
the same
okay.
exact yeast. I'm sorry. It's the same recipe, so it's not like.
Well, there's some really old English breweries that have been maintaining their yeast for like hundreds of years. So I wouldn't be surprised actually if there are brewers in Boston that do the same thing. Like,
Yeah, it's the Green Dragon Tavern,
that's cool.
and it's like.
I think that's near the Union Oyster House.
Revolutionary beer and oysters. What more could you need?
Established.
Some alcohol to kill off the vibrosis or the vibrosis. What is it? What's the name of that foodborne illness?
Yeah, so the original building has been demolished, but they still have the same recipe as the old pub.
That's cool.
Like, I think the building that is standing now has been there since the 1800s, like late 1800s.
It'd be cool if they managed to keep like mantle from a fireplace or a booth or something.
Yeah, they have some of the commemorative plaques and shit.
Yeah, Green Dragon was a pretty cool spot. They have live music there.
Is there
I
like
don't
a
have a lot
plank
of
of
space
wood?
for it,
Is
but
there a
it's
plank
still
of
cool.
wood that says the founders sat here?
No, they don't. Not that I saw.
That would be cool.
They had like history of the um establishment and the ale itself on the menus and shit, which was like, you know, um I think there's also like I think it might have been on, I don't know if it was on the Paul Revere path or whatever, but they have, you know, like the path of Paul Revere writing. So there's all these cool things, like they have the spot where Crispus Attucks was killed. You know, there's cool things in Boston as far as American history goes, and that's kind of where I did appreciate the Green Dragon Ale, just for the sake that, again, it's like if I can drink the same recipe as like 300 years ago and get in touch with that shit, that's it, it like does make you transcend time in a way. And I think there's something cool about that type of, you know, capacity to get in touch with history. But even then, that's where, like, you know, recipes, like I made African meat pies recently, and I was looking at it, like technically that recipe goes back to like not that specific one, but that type of recipe goes back like 12, 13,000 years at this point. So there's some things like when you're eating a meat pie and it feels like it's satiating your genetic code, it kind of is. It kind of is. And it's like, I can only imagine, you know, there's certain dishes I make where like I feel more in touch with them than others. Like I don't think meat, like hamburgers don't feel, they're good, but they don't feel like they're hitting that genetic string that other dishes hit, where I'm like, you eat certain things and it's like, oh shit, like my great something ate this in the past.
That's how I
that
feel
way
about dim
matzo
sum.
ball soup. Oh,
Yeah.
we said at the same time. You feel that way about dim sum? You said?
Oh yeah, dim sum's good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
No, I feel that there's some things that I kind of agree actually. Like the hamburger, the best hamburger I ever had was in Hong Kong. I don't think that the hamburger is the quintessential American sandwich.
But when I eat bison or deer, like I feel that shit in my jeans, like straight up. Like I don't feel beef in my jeans.
Man,
So
so
bison or like
venison.
deer, lamb, like that shit hits my jeans.
When now that you mention it, I've actually taken kind of an interest in acquiring venison, and like even to the point of like I'd like to go along and like on the whole process of like hunting a deer even because
Yeah.
I'm curious about it because
Oh, dude.
well it's not something that it's not in my standard repertoire, and so it's exciting on a theoretical level. It's like, oh yeah, you go out, you get in touch with nature, you track an animal or you find one or you lay a trap or whatever you do, whatever the process is, and then the end result is that you have this animal now that you are going to process and consume, and it's not like hasn't been living in a cage with a bunch of other animals eating, from the same slop pit. There's something about that that's kind of that I'm very keen on.
No, farm meat is completely different than wild meat. It's not even questionable. There's no question in my mind. Down to I think it's like grass-fed free range stuff has more vitamin B, or there's like measurable differences between the same animal in different environments. So like that's not even a question. But when when I've been fortunate enough to have venison that was hunted, there is an element of you feel closer to the animal. You straight up do. There's no question about it. And part of that is then you realize the exchange that's happening, that thing is allowing you to survive. That's why you thank it. That's why it's supposed to be a ceremony when you kill an animal and it allows you to live longer. It's supposed to be personal. It's supposed to be you thanking the animal. And I've been fortunate enough to be in a Lakota ceremony where they were, taking part in all these different aspects of thanking the animal and thanking nature, to see like when something gives you the capacity to keep on living, you should fucking thank it, whether you had to kill it or not. And this is why death should never be frivolous. People have to kill plants or animals to survive, one or the other. In that, if you're not we can't scavenge, because things that go bad make us sick. So there's a very small window between the time when something dies and the time it can be consumed and not cause the thing consuming it to become sick, which is why we have to harvest our food. We can't scavenge for the most part. Like, you can become accustomed to scavenging, which is why people who dumpster dive, they get sick at first, but eventually their stomachs get iron stomachs, and then they can start eating fucking moldy shit. Because technically, moldy stuff doesn't make us sick. We've become so accustomed to not eating moldy stuff that it makes us sick. It's like, actually, like, what is it, like penicillin? So there's all these things about our diet and artificial selection and the influence of artificial selection on where we are now. But when you realize that, that's when the people who take it too far and start going, oh, I'm going to eat raw. I'm keto.
Oh.
I'm keto and raw, 100% raw, raw vegetables, raw meat. Just give me a raw steak. I'm not even going to cook it.
Raw water.
Stupid, because then they take it too far in the other raw water. Oh, yes, no, raw water is not good for you. We need processed water, humans. We need processed water. Don't drink raw water. You will shit yourself until you die. Yet I digress. It's one of these things where, again, people have been too accustomed to irrational and polarized responses that they always end up going too far in the opposite direction.
You can't make me drink processed water. I get my water straight from this rock.
I do whatever I want to do. Don't tell me what to do. I'm going to succeed.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.